Hey guys, it's Carl with the Selflessly Selfish podcast, where we focus on self so we can be a benefit to others. If you like any of the content that you're about to hear, please, at the end of the video, feel free to subscribe, follow, or like so you can remain a part of a continued conversation designed to make you think. So, I think I've done about 12 takes on what it is that I want to talk about. And it doesn't seem to come out right because there's so many different ways that this conversation can go. So here's my 13th attempt of trying to have a conversation about us as men and how we treat trauma, depression, anxiety, and how being a man complicates us addressing our own traumas in our life or how we manage them. So if I seem kind of off, it's because one, it's a triggering conversation, and two, it's hard to get your thoughts together knowing that this conversation can branch in so many different directions, and I can talk until I'm out of breath and still not hit every single nuance of the topic. So I think I'm just going to start with just an understanding of what masculinity is. So masculinity as a societal context tells us as men and tells the rest of the world that as men, we have to operate in a certain capacity or a certain way to be seen as men. I don't think people truly understand that masculinity, when we are out in the world individually as men, is constantly challenged on a daily basis from our interactions out in the world. It is one of the things that men have to constantly prove on a daily basis to others, their coworkers, their spouses, their children, their parents. And I don't think that we as men truly understand. I don't think we're conscious enough to understand that we're unconsciously acting in this social contract all the time. And not only that, but just how mentally and physically stressful that can be when it comes to addressing the things that we need to address that are taking place emotionally. When we talk about masculinity applies that as men, we are courageous, we're strong, we're assertive, we essentially have our things together. And I know most of us don't have our shit together, but these are just some things that are implied, that you're a protector. These are things that are implied. Other things that are implied as it relates to masculinity for men is that, boys don't cry. Or you'll hear people say, be a man about it, or a real man would, right? So we start formulating our thoughts into mimicking from the time that we're young boys what being masculine is, and we adopt bits and pieces from all these different foundations that intersect into our generalized world, and we create an idea in our heads of what masculine is. And then oftentimes we'll adapt our masculinity or increase it in order to compete with other males, hope that we get the attention of a female, to appear as protectors, to bolster ourselves up. And I honestly and truly believe that it is at the detriment of our own mental health that we do these things. If society tells me that as a man I can't be emotional and I can't cry, how do I express myself when traumatic things happen to me? Am I only allowed to be angry? Am I only allowed to cause physical harm? Or do I do what most men do, which is repress or retract those feelings or mask those feelings for the sake of others? And also so we don't draw any attention to us that would make us not look masculine to those that we interact with. I think the latter is what we do, what we tend to do most of the time, or at least it's what I did most of the time and struggle to not continue to do, is that I would become cold to my needs just so I can keep up the appearance that I'm strong enough to take on the needs of everyone else. I gotta focus on my kids. I gotta focus on my wife. I gotta focus on my friends. I gotta get this money. I gotta go out here and do this. And we are just repressing emotion that wells up, and and we're masking depression. We're masking anxiety. We're not being real with ourselves. We're afraid to open up to our fiancés, our wives, our girlfriends about what's hurting us, because we are afraid that they'll see us as less than a man. So we bottle these things up, and when they do manifest, because I've learned if you don't deal with your emotions, especially for men, they will deal with you. And oftentimes the collateral damage comes out against other people, other entities. It shows in your work. It shows in your behavior. So what are you guys, what are the other men doing to navigate, emotions of sadness or anxiety or worthlessness, and doing something about it in such a way that they feel like they have control? And I think a lot of men, we feign or we pretend that we have control over these things, but in our quiet moments, and this is for the ladies, I think you guys need to know this, is that a lot of times in your man's quiet moments, they doubt themselves. They question their worth. They question their position. They question if they're worthy of being with you. They question if they're doing enough, if they're making enough money. And these are the things that work in the back of their minds as they prepare to go out into the world as men. And speaking for myself, especially as young black men. There's a lot of things that we carry that we go out into this world as men. And that's not to say that women don't carry anything at all. This is just one conversation about one specific thing, and it just happens to be about men. But I would hope that you would have an open mind to desire to learn and maybe understand that in your man's quiet moments, they're struggling, or they may need help, or they're pulling over on the side of the road to have a cry, or they're sitting in the driveway staring at the house, trying to mentally get themselves together to put on this mask of assertiveness, or this togetherness, or hey, I'm somebody that you can come to. There's a tendency for men to have to constantly be somebody that you can turn to for the answers. And that's not blaming women, because I think we as men, we put it on ourselves. I think other men put it on us. I think society feeds that. But normalize, this is for the men, normalize addressing and understanding that what you feel inside from a traumatic thing, whether it's you lost a loved one, you got something going on at work, whether it's feelings of worthlessness, maybe you're trying to understand your place in the bigger picture, maybe it's what you perceive as failure after failure after failure. Normalize that it's okay to feel these feelings. They're real feelings, but society has told us that we're not allowed to have these things, that it feels like we're doing something wrong as men when we cry, or when we're sad, when we're overly angry, when we're frustrated, when we want to be close to something, when we want to feel connected. Society has made it to where it's not okay for men to do that. And so we don't feel okay when we take time to ourselves, or we consider therapy, or we consider opening up to a spouse. Spouses, understand that even though you may feel like, well, my man should be able to talk to me about anything and everything, we can't talk to you about anything and everything. Not just because masculinity is such a push-pull that we're having an internal struggle with ourselves to speak to you. It's also that there's possibly times when we do open up in very small ways, and maybe they're not received in the way that we may have built up in our head, and that could be a us issue. But in a relationship, it's gonna be a we issue. If I hurt, you hurt, and vice versa. So understand that as strong and as put together as your man may appear, or as much trust that you have in your man, you know he's going to protect you, you know that he's going to provide for you, you know he's going to do things that's in the best interest of your family. Also know that that man has an internal struggle, maybe once in a while, maybe on a daily basis, where he needs reassurance that he's on the right path, that he's doing the right things. And he might be too afraid to open up to you and have that conversation with you, because the idea of you seeing him as weak or less than will cause you to not want to be with him, or would cause you to see him as less of a man. And it's such a fear that we have as men to not look like what we are doing our best to portray out into the world, that we will sacrifice our internal, our physical health and our mental health just for everybody else's benefit. And this is a very complicated conversation. I'm hoping I'm conveying it in a way that at least elicits some kind of conversation on a larger scale, just within your own households. I'm a big fan. I'm a huge fan of personal testimony. Not just hearing, not just I want to hear people's pain, but I want to hear how they overcame that. Because I've said this before to a lot of close friends. Your struggle is sometimes not your own, and there's always somebody that's watching your struggle. You have people that are looking up to you, then you may not know that. And it's in that mindset that we really have to address the things that take place inside, so we can be a benefit to others later. This whole idea of selflessly selfish is not just some name that I came up with because I thought it was clever. It's because I had such a struggle with understanding who I was as a person and who I wanted to be, and all the fuck ups that I had in my life, and having the self-awareness to understand that some of my wounds were self-inflicted, or understanding that a lot of times I was the villain in my own story. As I kept a log of all the times people had hurt me, as I got older and I started kind of doing the work to pay attention to who I was as a person, I realized that in the wake of not being aware of myself or my impact or how I affected others, is that I hurt a lot of people, that I wasted a lot of people's time. I wasted my time. And I'm not just speaking on relationships. I just mean my interactions and just trying to keep up socially with everyone else and what I felt like everybody else needed me to be, that I did that to such an exhaustion that I had no clue who I was as a person at all. I was always trying to be something else for someone else other than myself. And I think we as men really have to work on ourselves first to be a benefit to somebody else later. I cannot be a good father. I cannot be a good husband. I cannot be a good son. I cannot be a good brother to my brothers and sisters, or a friend to my friends, if I'm not taking the time to evaluate the things in my life that affect me. And masculinity is one thing that I think shoots over our heads as men that we don't realize affects us in a way that we treat ourselves so coldly that it can manifest in ways that are not healthy, whether that's self-harm or self-loathing, and in worst case scenarios, suicide. And how we treat help-seeking attitudes. Like, what's our attitude about seeking help for ourselves when we know that society tells us that it makes us weak? And not to get too much into it, me coming from a military background, adapt and overcome was the motto. Adapt and overcome over everything, to include yourself, to include your loss, to include your hurt, to include whatever it was that you were feeling inside that was not serving to others. In the Air Force, we have a motto that says service before self. And as amazing as that can be, meaning that you're so committed to something that you would ignore yourself, the irony of ignoring yourself for the benefit of something else. How can you truly give the best of yourself to something else if you're ignoring yourself? So that's it. That's the episode. I hope you guys got something of it. Every time I do an episode going from now to going forward, it's not just about putting out a message. This is also therapy for me. I have these thoughts in my head that I feel like I have to get out. And I always wonder if these thoughts are just thoughts that I have for myself, or do other people think about these things? Are these conversations that we need to be having more? And I don't mean just for men. I know this conversation was catered mostly to men today, but you can take some of this conversation and apply it to women too. How are you treating yourself? What are the things that are blocking you from focusing on you? What are the things that are affecting your mental health? What are the barricades? What are the blockages that socially or societally in your home or just out in the world that are keeping you from focusing on you and being the best version of you? And the best version of you is somebody that has self-awareness, somebody that understands that the only thing that you can control in this world is you. That's the only thing. So when you invest in yourself, when you give to yourself, the way that you give to others, the way you sacrifice to others, you'll be amazed at what it is that you're able to do. And you'll be amazed at what it is that you're able to overcome. You'll be amazed at what foundations you set for yourself, and you'll definitely be amazed at what boundaries you set for yourself to keep your mental health intact. But I'm going to leave this conversation by saying two things. Normalize putting yourself first, and normalize looking for real mentorship that is going to be honest with you, whether that's therapy, whether that's somebody that you look up to, whether that's a best friend or somebody that looks like they have their head on straight. There's somebody that can tell you and look to you and provide you some kind of guidance to let you know that, hey, I'm here, you are important, and just to get you back on track. Men, we can be strong for ourselves also. So again, thanks for tuning into this episode. God bless you guys, and think about it. Peace.
Can you get advice from somebody who